Today we're going to tell you the story about Eric Naposki. Played at UConn, played both football and basketball. You might not be that familiar with him, but less than 10 years ago, he was sentenced to life without parole for his involvement in a murder out in Newport Beach, California. It's a crazy story. It's a cold case for many, many years, and it was a recommendation we got from a couple different listeners, so we actually wanted to go into the case today, dive into the details, and tell you the story on Distant Replay.
This is Distant Replay.
So today we got a name that you probably haven't heard. When Mike presented this one to me, I honestly did not know much about Eric Naposki. Don't know who he is, don't know anything about his background, couldn't tell you what sport he played. So, Mike, you're not only going to be educating the listeners today, you're going to be educating me.
Sounds good, man. I'm glad to do it. Yeah, Eric Naposki is probably a name. If we have any die-in-the-wool true crime people that listen, they'll probably recognize his name. But If you're more a sports fan than a true crime fan, it's a name you might not recognize.
I don't, so I'm looking forward to today's episode. Again, you can find us online, distantreplaypodcast.com, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We always get a lot of recommendations and requests for true crime episodes on YouTube, so send them over to us. Please subscribe, too, and like the video. That would help us out a whole lot. So let's jump into Eric Naposki. So we always start with his background, but I really want to know about his background and who he is before we get into the crime.
Yeah, so he's grew up in East Chester, New York, which is in Westchester County. So he went to UConn to play football. And a unique story that happened when he went to UConn to play football was he ended up quitting the team. He got into an argument with the coach. This is back in the mid-'80s, like before UConn is even a Division I program. He gets into an argument with the coach and quits. Well, in the meantime, he actually joined and made the UConn basketball practice team that featured a young up-and-coming coach named Jim Calhoun.
Oh, wow.
Okay. He played on the UConn practice team for a little while. At that time, he had had a baby with his high school girlfriend. So he's kind of going through a life transition, just quit football, start trying to latch onto the basketball team. And Calhoun told him, look, man, you're super athletic. Why don't you try to give football another shot? So Naposki actually credits that with changing his direction as far as what he wanted to do next with his life. And what happens from then is he goes and basically tries out the old-fashioned way for the NFL. And he ends up playing with the Patriots for the 1988-1989 season. Okay. He was also with the Colts for a short time, and he also played in the World League of American Football for the Barcelona Dragons. Remember them, Ben?
I remember their name. I don't remember the World League of American Football, but I do remember the Barcelona Dragons.
Okay, yeah. So that's where he ends up professional football-wise. Now, in the meantime, when he was in the World League and in the NFL for a little bit, he had married his high school sweetheart. They now had 2 kids, but he was going through a recent divorce. So on one of the off seasons from the World League, he rented an apartment in Southern California, and that's where our true crime story begins.
All right, so you brought us up to date, and I guess too, the World League of Football became the NFL Europe, right? That's all kind of the same thing. Okay.
Yep.
There was a team in Birmingham actually that played in that, the Birmingham Fire. I bet you don't know anything about those guys, do you?
I do not. No.
I didn't think you did. All right, we'll stay on track here. All right, let's get to the crime. We're in Southern California. Let's get going.
All right, so we're in Southern California. 52-year-old millionaire named Bill McLaughlin. Okay, he's a medical device entrepreneur, and what he was known for, Ben, is he developed a groundbreaking machine that really helped make dialysis treatment efficient for patients. So this is the kind of invention that he's beloved for, right? Very well respected in the community. Worth $55 million, lives in Newport Beach, California. So all those beautiful scenes you see of Orange County, on the beach, this is the kind of lifestyle this guy's living. Loved by, like I said, his community, his friends, his family. Most known for this device that's saving lives,
Yeah.
Well, Bill's just coming off of being divorced after 25 years of marriage, okay? He had 25 years of marriage. He had kids with his ex-wife. His kids are grown. It was one of those things where parents are older, kids are grown. We're not really getting along anymore. Let's get a divorce kind of thing. Okay. He's, by all accounts, was devastated by this. All right. Ends up basically, feeling alone at this point. Well, unfortunately for Bill McLaughlin, on December 15th, 1994, his son, Kevin, finds him in his home shot dead after being shot at very close range 6 times.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so that is the crime we're going to discuss today. 52-year-old entrepreneur Bill McLaughlin shot 6 times in his home in Newport Beach, California. So as you can imagine, this is just a big story in general, never mind true crime. Someone being gunned down in their home in what is normally a relatively really nice neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about top 1% neighborhood.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, well-known neighborhood. Now, 2 years after Bill's divorce, okay, he started dating a woman named Nanette Johnston. You might think, based on her name, that Nanette was like minimally 70 years old.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's like a grandmother, yeah.
But she's actually 26, and Bill at the time when they start dating is 51. Nanette has 2 kids, and Bill basically takes the kids in and Nanette in like they're his own. You know what I mean? Nanette and Bill are dating. He treats the kids and her very well. They actually met through a newspaper singles ad, which, she posted her picture, and like, you remember those, Ben? Just like it's basically a wanted ad, but for singles.
Right, old school, yeah.
Yeah, there's a picture of her, a little blurb about her, with a quote that said, "If you take care of me, I'll take care of you."
Interesting.
So read into that what you may. But so they end up dating. Okay, so her and her kids are living with Bill at the time. Now, also living in the house with Bill is his son Kevin, who I mentioned had found him dead. So his son Kevin called 911, and when his son Kevin called 911, they really couldn't understand what he was saying, because his son Kevin had been involved in a very serious drunk driving accident in a couple years prior to this incident. And he was in a coma at one point. He was in the hospital for 4 months, and it impacted his ability to speak clearly. So when he called, like, law enforcement had no idea what was going on, right? So when they get to the scene, when law enforcement gets to the scene, Nanette is not home at the time, and it's just Bill's older son, Kevin, that's there. Kevin's like frantic. They move him outside, and now they address the crime scene. When they get to the crime scene, the police find a key in the front door that was used to enter the home, but they don't find any weapon. But what they do find that will help them later on are the bullet casings from the gun that was fired to kill Bill. Now, they look at Kevin first, because it's like, look, Kevin's in the house. He's the one who called 911, and he's family. Like, they have to clear him first. Kevin's story was, hey, look, me and my dad had dinner. I went upstairs to listen to music. I heard these loud bangs, and I went downstairs as fast as I could. Now, remember, he has like a disability because he got really, the accident was a really traumatic thing for Kevin. So he moved as fast as he could, but he just naturally moved slow because of his disability. And by the time he got there, his father was laying there dead, right? Wow, yeah. So while police are not going to completely close the door on Kevin as a suspect, look, he genuinely sounds devastated. His dad was his best friend. His dad was taking care of him after the accident that happened. So they've pretty much cleared him as a suspect after just evaluating the entire situation, okay? So now we're at the point where Nanette arrives home, in the hours after police have already been called, and there's, she comes home to a scene where there's police officers going in and out of her house when she arrives home. So she gets home, she's told the news about Bill passing away and getting shot, and she's very emotional. So, of course, police ask her, hey, where were you tonight, just to kind of check up on her whereabouts. She says, I was at my son's soccer game. So she, like I mentioned, she had 2 kids, and that her 2 kids went home with her ex for the night. And she said, look, my kids were with my ex. I took advantage of the situation because, again, it's mid-December here, and I went Christmas shopping. She even provides them with like receipts from the shopping trip. And overall, police don't consider her a prime suspect because she genuinely sounds devastated. And let's face it, Bill is affording her a life that she dreamt of, you know? So at the time, they're thinking, well, why would she want him dead? Before they really have a clear picture of what's going on.
Yeah, and the alibi makes a lot of sense.
It checks out,
Yeah.
As police keep on examining all the evidence that they found, they keep on coming back to those keys. Remember, someone let themselves in the house with a key. The keys were newer, so they knew that the keys were copies of the original. So they go back to Nanette, and they're like, do you know who may have had access to the keys? Is there anyone that would want to hurt Bill? Like, trying to get more information from her. She gives them the name of someone named Howard, So Bill and Howard's relationship was they both co-invented that dialysis machine that I mentioned before that had made Bill millions. Well, what happened was early on, soon after it was invented, Bill bought Howard out of the business.
Okay.
So he bought Howard's half of the business. Well, in the coming years, there was still royalties rolling in from the sales they made with those dialysis machines. So now that Howard was cut out of the business because he got bought out, all those royalties were going to were going to Bill, and Howard was very distraught about that, to the point where, he sued Bill for the right to have, access to some of those royalties.
Yeah.
And even very recently, to Bill's murder, the court decided that all the royalties should go to Bill. So the police look at this as a possible motive for Howard.
Yeah.
So police go, they question him. Look, Howard is not very remorseful that Bill is dead. He is not particularly emotional at all when talking about Bill. He's still very upset about what happened. But Howard has an alibi for the day and time of the crime. And they don't think that a hitman did it, so they don't think like Howard hired someone to kill Bill, because the crime scene was very sloppy. There was bullet casings left, the keys were left in the door, So they just say, look, Howard seems like he would have a motive here because of the money, but we're going to cross him off our list of suspects as well. So they're still kind of left with nothing here in the early days of the investigation. Police start looking into Nanette again. They look into all the possible links, in her everyday life. And where they end up first with this, Ben, is they question her ex-husband. Remember her story was, I went to my son's soccer game with my ex-husband?
Right.
So they question her ex-husband. Her ex-husband confirmed she was at the soccer game, and she did take the kids after, and that he did take the kids after the soccer game. But he also tells investigators that Nanette was there with another guy that he thought she might have been involved with.
Okay.
The investigators are like, what? Like, this is news to them.
Yeah.
Nanette never mentioned, I went to go watch my kids play, and I was at the game with someone other than my fiance, Bill. I was there with another guy.
Right.
Obviously, she never mentioned that. So now this perks up police, and they begin surveilling Nanette. So what Nanette had done in the meantime was she didn't want to stay at the house where the murder took place. So Bill had another house right down the street, like right on the beach, that Nanette would stay at, or Nanette had access to. So she was actually staying there, like another house right on the beach in Newport Beach, like literally 5 minutes away. So she's staying at another one of Bill's houses down the street, and they're surveilling her 24/7. The same day they start surveilling her, they see a man closer to her age enter the home with a key. So this is the second home now where someone that is not familiar to police is entering one of Bill McLaughlin's residences with a key.
Yeah. Big red flag.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, they continue to surveil them throughout the whole night. The two are enjoying a night decorating a Christmas tree. We're talking like a day or two after the murder here, all right? They're doing this in clear view of the beach. Like, there's one of those big picture windows that look out on the beach. And they're literally putting up a Christmas tree right there, so like anyone who's walking by can see it. They're not trying to hide anything here. And, Nanette had sort of portrayed herself as being nervous for her life because of, hey, maybe the person that shot Bill is going to come back and shoot me. Well, now that blows that out of the water for police. Police are like, well, she's not that worried about her safety if she's putting up a Christmas tree in clear view of anyone who can walk by.
Right.
Right? So now the next logical question is, police start to question, like, who's this guy she's with? When the guy leaves the house, they follow him from the home. He commits like a minor traffic violation, but it's enough of a reason for them to pull him over. So they find out that this gentleman has an outstanding warrant, and they arrest him. And that man, as you're probably guessing, is Eric Naposki.
There he is.
So this is where Eric enters our story here. So of course they bring him into the police station again on that outstanding warrant charge. They question him about his relationship with Nanette. Naposki says they've been friends for like 2.5 years. He knows who Bill McLaughlin is, but he's never met him. He says he was at the soccer game with Nanette, and they left early so he could get to his job as a bouncer. So at this point, in the offseason here from his football, Naposki is a bouncer at a local club.
Okay.
Now, when police find out what club he was a bouncer at, one of the detectives kind of realizes right away, wow, this club is only like 100 yards from where Bill lived. So literally like in very close proximity to where Bill lived. So nothing he's telling them is like eliminating him at all at this point, right? So now, because they have him on a traffic-related warrant, they also had the ability to search his car. When they searched Eric Naposki's car, they found a journal which contained a lot of info, but among the info that was in the journal was Bill McLaughlin's license plate number written down.
Okay.
They then used that to obtain a search warrant to his apartment. So they say, hey, look, we don't know what's going on here yet, but we're piecing things together here. You know, he's with the victim's fiance romantically. He's at the soccer game. He works close to where the shooting happened. This license plate is in his journal. We want to take a closer look at this guy. So they use that information to obtain a search warrant for his apartment. And when they go to execute the search warrant, who do you think is there with him in his apartment?
Nanette.
Nanette is there.
Oh, man.
So there's a unique situation here because now they got them both together. So what law enforcement decides to do is they decide to question them in separate rooms, right? So picture this. You got Eric in one room, Nanette in an adjacent room, and they're both being questioned by police. Nanette, when questioned, says that, look, me and Bill had this unspoken thing. He knew I saw younger guys, and he was okay with it. She also says that Eric was not aware of the nature of her and Bill's relationship, that Eric was of the thinking that they had a business partnership together and nothing romantic.
Okay.
That's what Nanette is saying, you know, when questioned by police. Now, later, it would come out that, like, there's no way Bill McLaughlin was the kind of guy that would share his fiance with someone. You know what I mean? And let her kind of roam around and do what she wanted. So I think that's of note as well. Now, they have Eric in the other room questioning him. He says, look, I am dating Nanette, after initially he downplayed their relationship. And that from what he knows about Nanette and Bill's relationship is that they work together and sometimes Nanette will stay at his house, but they're not romantically involved.
Okay, that doesn't make much sense, but...
It doesn't, right? It doesn't, but I get the kind of feeling that he might have genuinely thought that, though. I don't know.
Okay.
That's still one part of the story I'm confused at. But anyway, when investigators tell Eric they're actually engaged, like with that, hey, look, man, I know you don't think they're together, but Nanette was engaged to Bill McLaughlin. He becomes like visibly upset. You know, like he genuinely didn't know.
Okay.
All right.
Wow.
Now they ask him, hey, why'd you have the license plate number? It's kind of suspicious. You randomly have his license plate number written in a journal that we find in your car. He said that Nanette had told him that she had been sexually assaulted by Bill, and Eric wanted Bill's license plate number as kind of a way to protect her. So
how does that?
I don't know.
I
have no idea, but that's what he's saying. So he's saying like he's like her knight in shining armor, basically.
Right. Okay.
Now to the gun, because remember we found the casings there. Initially, he lied about owning guns. Then he admitted, hey, look, I have a 9mm gun, but I lent it to a friend who needed it for a bouncing gig that he had. Police questioned the friend, and the friend says, yeah, Eric gave me a gun, but he didn't give me a 9mm. He gave me a 380, which admittedly, I'm not a gun guy. I'm not 100% sure what that means.
But it's a different gun.
It's a different kind of gun, all right? Then Eric finally says, hey, look, the 9mm was stolen. Now police are like, look, that's too much of a coincidence. Tell all these lies about the guns, then tell us it's stolen when it's someone in your position right now with what we're questioning you about, you know? So they have nothing to really hold him on, but they're growing more and more suspicious, okay?
Mm-hmm.
In subsequent interviews with the police, Eric is very cocky with the police. He starts taunting them, calling them like a small-time police department. Throughout all of this, he's actually living with Nanette, driving Bill's cars, and spending his money.
So even if he doesn't know anything about the murder, He's still comfortable taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, he's very cocky.
Right.
That's something that you see a common theme here with Eric Naposki throughout all this. Everything you read is that he had an edge to him. He had a cockiness about him, and he would like contradict his own answers when being questioned by police.
But not.
And they would ask him. Yeah, they would ask him like, "Hey, why are you contradicting yourself?" And he's like, "I don't know. I just feel like it. I feel like screwing with you guys a little bit."
Right. Okay.
Like just a real cocky approach.
Yeah, getting a good
along
sense of who he
with.
is.
Yeah, exactly. It speaks to his character, and along with living with Nanette and basically just inserting himself into the life as a whole. Now, the next big shoe to drop was 2 months after the murder, Bill's daughter finds that there was a $250,000 check written to Nanette on December 14th, so literally the day before the murder.
Mm-hmm.
They look into it more and find that Nanette has been stealing money from Bill for a period of time.
Jeez.
So in April of 95, she's arrested on charges stemming from stealing the money. It comes out she stole $500,000 from Bill, all told. She pled guilty. She was sentenced to 1 year and only served 180 days. So this is where we're at in this situation now. No one's been arrested for Bill's murder. Nanette serves 180 days for stealing $500,000 from him. After this, at some point, Nanette and Eric break up. Nanette ends up getting married a couple more times over the years. Eric moves back to the East Coast and starts a family. He even plays in the World League again in 1996 and 1997 when he has all these things clouding over him.
Yeah.
The case went cold for 15 years. So to me, this is the most remarkable part of the story is picture Nanette and Eric Naposki. Like they had this cloud of suspicion over them, and these two both have the ability to just now go on and live their separate lives like presumably nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
You know, that's a crazy part of this story. And they both do it on opposite sides of the country. Now, little unbeknownst to them, there's a new DA that comes in Orange County, and he decides to have cold case detectives look back into the case of the murder of Bill McLaughlin. That cold case investigator re-listened to all 65 interviews associated with the case. So they were like on like a tape recorder type interviews.
Mm-hmm.
He came across an interview with a lady named Suzanne Kogar, who was Eric's neighbor at the time of the murder. So Eric Naposki lives in the same apartment complex as this Suzanne Kogar, and they would hang out every once in a while.
Okay.
She told police that in November of 1994, her and Eric were talking in her apartment, and he told Suzanne that Nanette and Bill were business partners, that Nanette stayed at his house from time to time, and that Bill had made unwanted sexual advances to Nanette. And he basically tells this lady Suzanne, to the point where this lady Suzanne is really taking Bill seriously. Says like, look, this made him this situation made Eric very upset, and he even said during the conversation that he wanted to have killed. She said he felt he was serious about it in the moment, but it's one of those things you're like, afterwards, when she thought about it, she's like, man, he's not really going to have the guy killed,
Yeah,
you know?
right.
They just thought he was speaking out of emotion. Now, to add to that, she also said he came back to her in January, so this is after the murder's taken place, and told her that if the police come and question her, to not mention what he said to her regarding Bill, because Bill had actually been killed. And she's like, the guy you told me that you wanted to kill is dead? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, well, did you do it? And he gives her some like evasive, well, maybe I did, maybe I didn't type response.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. So this lady is like, at this point is like, oh man, you know, like she's like nervous, very, very nervous. He also tells Suzanne that the keys that were made to enter the home, remember how it was pretty clear that someone had made copies of the keys to enter Bill's home that night?
Right.
That the keys that were made to enter the home were duplicated from a place near their apartment complex.
Okay.
This is really what sparks the interest of investigators, you know, in 2009 when they reopened the case and when they talked to Suzanne Kogar, is that's something only the killer would know.
Yeah.
It was not publicly available information that the keys were copied from a store close to where Eric Naposki's apartment building was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
What the cold case investigation also reveals is that they have a little bit more updated ballistic testing now 15 years later, and they determined that the gun used in the crime was the same as the one Naposki owned, that 9mm that he said was lost.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have the gun, but they knew it came from a 9mm, which he said he owned and he lost.
Yeah. Or it was stolen.
Oh, sorry, it was stolen.
Oh, I
Yeah, it was stolen.
guess he said both stories.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So arrest warrants are issued based on all that information. Arrest warrants are issued for Eric and Nanette, and they're arrested on May 21st, 2009. So
Wow.
we're talking, 14 and a half years
Mm-hmm.
after, Bill McLaughlin's murder. There's finally people that are going to stand trial for his murder. Now it goes to trial. Eric's defense was basically like, it was Nanette who did this. He didn't have anything to do with it. The prosecution says, so they're standing trial separately. So Eric's defense, again, I didn't have anything to do with it. It was all Nanette. The prosecution says Eric entered Bill's house at 8:30 with the key that he had made. The key got stuck in the door, which is why he couldn't get it out. He still entered the house anyway and shot Bill and killed him. They also said he was surprised to hear that the son was home. And when he heard the son starting to move upstairs, he ran out of the house and in his haste, just forgot that he had left the key in the door.
Okay. Makes sense.
But what really sunk Eric Naposki was Suzanne Kogar's testimony. She testified to everything I outlined before. She testified to a trial. And I saw interviews with her where she just says, look, I was scared going in there, but I'm really glad I went in there and testified because I feel like, he needed to have, consequences for what he did,
Mm-hmm.
So she ends up testifying to everything I outlined before. After a 4.5-week trial, they find Eric guilty on July 14th, 2011 for the murder of Bill McLaughlin, and he's sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Nanette's trial was up next. She was also convicted and sentenced to life in prison as well. So in the end, like I said, nearly 15 years later, you have, or more than 15 years later, by the time 2011 rolls along, Nanette Johnston and Eric Naposki are finally held accountable for the murder of Bill McLaughlin, and they're both serving life in prison.
Jeez. Well, that's
Yeah,
great.
and-
But I hate it for they both had their own separate families at that point too, right? All
Yeah.
new lives at that point.
Exactly. And what's even crazier, Bill's son, actually in between, the murder and the conviction, actually ended up drowning in Hawaii.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
Wow.
So what happened was the mother, Bill's first wife ended up moving to Hawaii. So the son moved, and lived with her. And the story goes he loved the water, loved the beach. He was in the water at the beach, slipped the wrong way, got caught up in a current and ended up drowning.
Man.
So
Awful.
that family, I mean, what they've been through is unimaginable. Like you said, there's a lot of innocent people that Eric Naposki and Nanette Johnston have left in their wake, and he adamantly denies being involved in any of this, still to this day. He is very adamant that he is not guilty of the murder. He was in the news a little bit, even somehow journalists drew comparisons between him and the Aaron Hernandez situation. I didn't really understand that, other than there's not one similarity between them. Other than the fact that they were convicted of murder, and they both played football at one point, but nothing similar about their crimes, nothing similar about their football careers. But people who know the name Eric Naposki probably also know the name Nanette Johnston, and this was a legit front page true crime story, especially when it came back, after all those years as a cold case.
Did you get the sense at all that these two kind of went into that relationship with Bill? They were already together and kind of put that ad out to lure someone in and then just basically take over their life and their bank accounts? Did any of that detail come out?
I couldn't find anything that confirmed or denied that. But from what the timeline sort of is either very similar to when Nanette met Eric and Bill, or she actually knew Eric a little bit longer.
Okay.
If you follow the timeline, but it did
Right.
not. Look, he gave his neighbor, the same story he gave police, if you remember, when they were initially questioned in the apartment in separate rooms, that Bill had been, sexually or had made unwanted sexual advances on Nanette,
Yeah.
and he was mad about that. So I err more on the side of Nanette lying to Eric to get him to commit like a crime of passion.
Basically playing both sides.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, look, Eric is no Boy Scout here, okay, and he deserves what happened to him and getting put away for life in prison for killing someone. But Nanette, to me, is like the mastermind behind all this, and really the true like diabolical one, if you want to call it that.
Right. Wow, that's a pretty remarkable story. A lot of the ones we get don't have the cold case and that element to it. So this is a bit unique, and like an actual true crime, one that you'd see a documentary on, or like really much more coverage. But I've never heard this story before.
So I research this stuff all the time. I see this case mentioned everywhere. But this is the first time I really decided to, take a deep dive into it. Because, look, it has all the Hollywood elements, right? Older guy, younger woman, jilted lover in Naposki, money,
Beautiful community
sex.
they live in.
Yeah. Everyone,
Right.
successful people, good-looking people involved, just stuff that, the tabloids and the true crime TV eats up. So it had all those elements to it.
Nice. Well, good, very, very good, Mike, taking us through that. A lot of great detail, and I definitely feel I've got a pretty good grasp of the story, but definitely interested in maybe checking out more. Is there more information, anything that you'd point somebody to that wants to get more on this?
You can find, if you Google Eric Naposki, Nanette Johnston, crime or whatever, there is a boatload of stuff everywhere.
Okay.
There's TV shows, documentaries, there's YouTube clips, there's news stories. You can find anything you want on this story.
Very good. Well, that's it. Eric Naposki. That's his story. If you didn't know of him or why he's serving life in prison without parole, there you go. Very interesting indeed, and a pretty horrible story to take us through. But if you have something you want us to go back and research and share the details on, any kind of true crime sports person that you might have heard about or want to learn more about, or would just like to hear our opinion on, send it to us. You can leave us a comment on YouTube, connect with us on Twitter, on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com, any number of ways to do that, and we'd appreciate it. So, Mike, thanks for taking us through this today, man.
Yeah, this is another listener suggestion, a multiple listener suggestion. So thanks again. Keep them coming, and we'll see you next week.